Morning, everybody. Happy budget day and welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's assistant editor, Jason Beattie. Morning, Jason.
Morning, Susie.
Bright and breezy and full of beans for the budget. Now,
so excited. Can't contain myself.
This is the People's Paper Review. So get into the comments, ask us your questions, tell us what you think about the budget that's coming up. And those of you listening later on podcast will just have to count your blessings or your pennies, whichever you have most of after the Chancellor has rinsed you for as many as possible. Now, what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on Kate Middleton's ever helpful Uncle Gary, who has gone on to Celebrity Big Brother and claimed that Meghan Markle harmed the Princess of Wales's marriage with all the stress of that royal hullabaloo. Now, if you think poking one's nose into the private spaces of public figures is just not cricket, then look away now, because on page 2, and I'm sorry about this, I hope you've all had your breakfast, we have been invited into Rishi Sunak's bedroom. What, Jason, what is going on here exactly? And do we have to be in here?
Unfortunately, we do, Susie, but what were they thinking? I mean, it's just extraordinary. So Sunak and his wife have given an interview to Grazia magazine, and the most revealing detail they got out of this stunning exclusive interview, with the Prime Minister was he likes to break off from work and go upstairs and remake the bed.
Why? Why would anyone do that? I mean, I appreciate that not everybody works near
more
their bedroom.
personal detail.
Oh dear, I think Jason's internet is pretty bad. Hopefully that can get sorted out, but I'm not quite sure why anyone would do. I mean, not everyone works from home. They don't all have an office near their bedroom. My bedroom's just down there, and my daughter's bedroom is in between it. Do you know what? I don't pop in there at any time during the day to make the bed. What happens is the dog goes in there and makes a mess of it all. Rishi Sunak wouldn't be able to cope if he was working here at all. Now, what do you think, everybody? Are you ever tempted to go back and make your bed in the middle of the day? Why don't you make it when you get up, if that's your thing, if you're bothered about it? Presumably, the Prime Minister gets up a lot earlier than the rest of his family. He's got a lot of work to do. And maybe when they leave the bed, he's not quite happy about it and he has to go back and tidy it up because he knows they won't have done it on their way out of the house. But isn't that a bit control freakery? Isn't that kind of weird in a way? Jason, I don't know if your internet is...
disappeared, Susie, but I've come back again. I carried on listening to you.
It's all right, I rambled.
Little monologue we were doing.
Making your bed.
Just go upstairs and tidy the bed. He rearranges the dishwasher after it's been loaded. I'm
assured that happens between many couples, and one is tidier than the other, and they don't like the way the other one stacked the dishwasher. But coupled with the bed thing, I can't see, it's normally the case that you can say a public figure's career is in its terminal stages when they start talking about their bedroom secrets in the pages of a glossy magazine. That's like it. That's over. You are on the way to OnlyFans now. Bye. So the idea of why... Go on, Jason.
I mean, this is just typical, and it sums up the problems they have. That somebody in Downing Street said this was a good idea, PR-wise. But what we need to do is we need to show that Rishi's actually really quite human, and the fact that he's a multimillionaire doesn't mean he doesn't live an ordinary life. And they thought that this would be the best way of presenting it, and all it's done is, one, reinforce his weirdness, and two, actually it makes them seem more precious than they already were. And there's always a danger of reeling out political spouses. My personal advice is not to do it, and this is an example why. That they don't come across as a normal couple. They don't come across as your neighbours who live in a semi down the street. They come across as these incredibly as I say, precious very, very well-heeled pair who kind of like are almost patronizing us for trying to give this kind of insight into how they're supposedly ordinary when they really are not. It's a PR disaster of an extraordinary scale. And it shows that how out of touch they are. They think this is successful, this is a good thing to do. That's it's madness.
I'm not sure that revealing everything
is slightly embarrassing.
Yeah, and kind of if you want to humanize people, then revealing that he takes out everything that she puts in the dishwasher and has to make the bed again is a bit control freakery. I think that would kind of concern men and women in particular. It's not great. And plus, she's revealed that when they met, she used to eat her food in the bed and have plates in the bed. Now, I can understand in that context why he wants to go and check the bed hasn't got any foodstuffs in it, maybe by lunchtime. But they both seem really bizarre. Who leaves plates in the bed apart from really awful, like 13-year-old boys? I don't see how that really works and kind of humanize them, like you say. But other examples that spring to mind are Ed Miliband in his kitchen with 2 ovens, right? Which just made people go, what? Theresa May in her leather trousers. Things that nobody wants them to step outside the realms of politics and to start talking about other stuff and go, oh, we're really normal, really. Look, I like high fashion. Look, I like baking, whatever it might be. Why do politicians think this would help them? Because there's not a single politician I've ever met who strikes me as a particularly normal human being. They've all got something special and different about them. That's why they're politicians and we're not.
But if you're Sunak, and actually one of the kind of perceptions of you is you seem a little bit nerdy and more interested in spreadsheets than in actual kind of, how people live their lives. Why give an interview reinforcing all those negative stereotypes?
By saying you have to restack the dishwasher.
Yeah, that's what we want leading the country. Yeah?
It's astonishing, isn't it?
Persons who obsess over Purcell.
So yeah, he's talking about real life and he hasn't got a servant doing it. He hasn't got a butler doing the dishwasher, but he's obviously a lunatic and she's just disgusting with her culinary habit.
I know. Rinse aid Rishi has been rinsed. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Mike says, if Rishi doesn't have staff to look after his home, then I'll be amazed. Most ultra-rich people do. He's got more than one home, of course, Mike, and there'll be a lot of staff in the other places. Downing Street is just a flat. He should be able to look after that himself. Plainly, he's doing the housework. I don't know who's doing the dusting, but I put money on Rishi Sunak running the pledge round now and again, if he's that kind of lad. We'll have to see, won't we? But it's kind of astonishing they think that this is going to give them a bounce in the polls in some way, that it's going to help his overall sense of perception. What do you think, everybody? Do you feel, let's not be cruel, do you feel that Rishi Sunak is more human as a result of you knowing that, is there something here that he's doing that connects with you and in your life in some way? Do you have similar arguments with your other half about who makes the bed and who stacks the dishwasher? Is this sane or is this deranged? Get into the comments and let us know. Have a vote, sane or deranged. Now, moving on to the main story of the day, and speaking of bounces, the budget today is something that Rishi has pretty much written for his Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, and he'll be hoping that's something that can save his reputation a bit. But on pages 8 and 9 of the Mirror today, nurses, teachers and social workers say they're going to quit in droves because of what we think is going to be in this budget. And Jason, can you take us through this? Why are they saying this?
This is the heart of the debate of the budget, Susie. So Jeremy Hunt has a little bit of what they call headroom, i.e. how much money he can spend. And he's made the decision, according to all the reports, that he's going to spend the bulk of this, some 10 billion, on cutting national insurance. This is what they tried in November, by the way, and had zero effect. But he's going to try it again because he wants to try and, offer some pre-election sweeteners. The Tories are 20 points behind in the polls. They've got, this is all they've got to offer is we'll try and put more money back in your pocket after, by the way, the tax burden is the highest level since the Second World War. The problem is the government doesn't seem to be on the same page as the public. The public are looking around and going, I can't get a GP appointment. I spent conversation in the pub last night with 3 friends. But two of them were just talking about how they've both been to A&E recently and had to wait more than 12 hours. That's their concern, you know? Or they can't, they're seeing their schools their children go to are falling down. Now, the public are sitting there going, actually offering us, £8 a week more when our local council's gone bust, the potholes, the streets have got worse and worse, that, my kids' school, the roof is falling down, that, the NHS is unable to cope with demand. That's their priority. And that is the problem of what we've got in this budget. It's the Tories thinking, oh, what really worked for us is, we cut taxes. And the public going, actually, we don't want taxes cut. We want some stability. We want some investment in our public services. And we want a country which works.
Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? So the public sector, the unions here, I suppose you could say, some people might say this is just a bit of an idle threat. The unions are left-wing, we've got a right-wing government, they're bound to criticise the budget before it's even started. On Twitter, Brian says, we always hear a lot of nonsense from left-inclined mainstream media on public services. Everyone knows it's inefficient, wasteful, and better services can be provided by a touch of efficiency, like Amazon. Except people in Amazon don't get paid anything very much, and they're constantly trying to go out and strike, Brian. John says this budget will once again benefit the rich who don't use public services, who will be hit the hardest, though they will use private waste disposal companies to take away their waste. What we do know, and it's quite extraordinary with this budget, we know what the big giveaway is before they've started, because someone heard about it and then the Treasury wasn't able to deny it. So we know there's going to be, we reckon, a 2p cut in national insurance, which, as Jason said, would be about £8 a week to those people who would qualify for it. Now, not everybody pays national insurance. So if you're a pensioner, it makes a difference. If you're self-employed, can often make no difference. And if you're only really, it works if you're earning over £19,000. If you're earning less than that, you're not going to benefit too much from it. And the people who are earning 50 grand or more are the ones who are going to make the most. They will get about £1,200. Now, this will cost overall £10 billion to do this. So if all those public sector workers who are complaining in today's paper there all earn over 19 grand, they technically benefit. Jeremy Hunt, if he was here, would say, well, those public sector workers who are complaining, they will get the national insurance cut. They will benefit from it. And we don't know the details yet, but usually these big giveaways are kind of paid for on the never, never. And they offset it by saying, we'll have austerity and public sector cuts in about 5 years' time. And usually we never quite get there because, other things have happened between now and then. So he presents his maths now and manages to make the country look solvent by promising he'll cut something at some point in the future. So is this austerity, which the unions are so worried about, Jason, is that maybe, or is it definitely something that's just in the post and hasn't arrived yet?
Well, let's just address the point first about whether this threat is an idle one or not. It's already happening. There's a shortage of around 40,000 nurses in the NHS at the moment. The government missed its recruitment target last year for recruiting more. So people are not are already walking with their feet. But this is not an idle threat. Do you know the average age of a teacher, Susie?
No, is it 7?
It's about 36.
Right.
And the problem is, most teachers are incredibly young and they're leaving early because of it, of the strains of the job and the low pay and the low morale. So in the public sector, you've already got a shortage of people who want to do the job. Look, if you impose more cuts on public services, as you said, and this is what Hunt is doing, he's partly paying for these tax cuts by planning further public spending cuts after the election. That's then you can see why more people are like to leave those professions. It means already in the NHS, I can't remember the exact statistic, but I think it's like kind of 1 in 8 shifts are not fully staffed at the moment because and so you can imagine that puts more pressure on the staff who are there, and they're working incredibly long hours. They're doing minimum of 12-hour days, nurses, and that's hard in a very pressurized, sometimes very challenging job.
Yeah. And let's do a bit of a scientific actually check on this. So we've got lots of viewers at the moment. What do you think, everybody? What do you want the Chancellor to put in your budget? This is your money that he's spending on things that you would want. So do you want that spent on tax cuts, on national insurance cuts? Is that going to make a big difference to you? Do you qualify for this? Would you like him to cut something else? Some Tories have already come out and said, because we've had this early leak, they don't like their own party's budget and they would rather it spent on an income tax cut, which is a bit more expensive, but also sort of benefits pensioners a bit more. Mike says there can't be many surprises coming in the budget. Almost all the meat has been briefed out already. In more honourable days, chancellors would have resigned because some budget details have leaked before the speech. It does mean that everyone kind of gets their ammunition ready in advance, which probably isn't a good thing. Why do they do this, Jason? Why do they have to tell us in advance? They fly a lot of kites about what they may or may not do, like for weeks and weeks before they get to that point, don't they?
This is kind of it. It's a fairly recent thing. I mean, the Treasury, and this was under Labour as well, used to give out like one or two kind of very small scale budget stories to kind of keep the kind of the media happy. But it's kind of and often they're really boring. So like the day before the budget, we'll get a story about there's going to be a new kind of £1 coin design. It was that dull. Now the Tories, particularly since Osborne, have started doing these kind of like week-long kind of series of drops of news stories. So you kind of like a week out, you get one, then you kind of get another one. And so like almost all of it is being kind of just kind of handed out. So there's one rabbit which they hope would grab the attention on the day. There may still will be today. It may be that the 2% cut in national insurance is not the headline from the budget, and Hunt's got something else up his sleeve. But it does kind of, I mean, as Mike said, it's pretty disrespectful to Parliament. In many ways, it kind of takes some of the kind of the drama and surprise out of the budget. And I'm not entirely sure whether it necessarily works anymore, because when you brief out so much, people kind of going, well, that was a bit disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, someone said to me earlier last week, that budgets used to be something that everyone stopped and watched and paid attention to because it mattered if you're going to get 5p on a packet of cigarettes or whatever, 10p on a bottle of whiskey. And then there'd be lots of people who would queue, wouldn't they, to be either before midnight or after midnight, to be first in the queue to either get the petrol before it went up or to get the cigarettes
on your roll-ups and
whatever it might be. And these days it just seems to be one really. I mean, the budget just
interestingly, I think you've actually kind of you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. Is that the Tories' biggest problem is that people aren't listening to them anymore. They just want to go. So ultimately, it probably doesn't really matter what Hunt says today. Because the narrative is already set that this is a government which has overstayed its welcome. People have wised up to the idea that they're being kind of bribed rather than rewarded with tax cuts. The bigger picture is not whether you will be kind of £8 a week better off or not. It's 14 years of an economy which has failed to grow, where wages have gone backwards. Resolution Foundation, a think tank which looks at low pay, recently calculated that since the Tory came to power, the average worker's lost around £10,700 a year, and of a failure to make the promises they promised on things like restoring public services or social care. I mean, interestingly, the 2% cut in national insurance, in less than 3 years ago, Boris Johnson promised to raise national insurance by 1.25% to pay for social care.
Exactly.
Within 3 years, they've completely reversed their policy on this.
Well, that was the post-pandemic thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and like, so at one point we're going to raise the tax to pay for social care. Now they're going to cut it further, and what's going to happen to social care? Nothing. We don't. There's thousands of people out there who desperately need care, and they're not getting it, and the government's got no plan. Now, if I was doing a budget, I would be quite embarrassed by that.
Well, I suspect if you were doing the budget, Jason, it would be slightly different to the one we're probably going to get today. Rachel says, Labour were going to spend the non-dom tax on breakfast clubs and the NHS. Now the Tories will take it away for a tax cut we can't afford as a country. You need a strong economy for tax cuts. This is the suggestion that Jeremy Hunt might nick Labour's clothes a bit and do that non-dom tax cut, which kind of screws up a bit Labour's plans and sums for what they were going to spend when they get into power, if they get into power. Now, we all know, Rachel's made a good point here. We all know that the Tories, although they've offset this spending really for over the next 5 years, the tax cuts, we know the Tories aren't going to be setting the next 5 years of budgets, don't we? Pretty much. And so it'll be Labour that has to find the money for this in the future, unless circumstances drastically change. Now, why, Jason, would a Tory chancellor like Jeremy Hunt, who in his own constituencies, the polling is showing that he's going to lose to the Lib Dems, why would he try to spend the money of the next government? And would he do the same thing if it looked more like the next government was going to be a Tory one?
Probably not. There's definitely a lot of salting of the earth going on here. And there's a kind of, there's a lot of kind of pre-election trickery by trying to set Labour massive traps by saying, are you going to match our spending and tax plans or not? Labour's been quite canny. They've seen this great hole in the ground and walked around it, going, well, we're not going to fall into that. We're not that stupid. And it's awkward for Labour in one respect, but the non-dom was going to pay for various things, and now where's the money going to come from? And Rachel Reeves is going to have to say that. But on the other side, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, can go, listen, this is about choices. Our choice was to use that money to increase the number of staff working in the NHS, and as the reader said, to pay for things like breakfast clubs. Your choice is to try and bribe voters with it. Which one did voters want? And actually, I think Labour can probably win that argument at the moment.
They're not going to win the argument, but of course, if they have to form a government and maybe do the autumn statement or do next year's spring budget, the sums are going to look very, very different, aren't they? And there's going to be all kinds of other pressures on them. And I suppose the big thing, and let us know what you think of this, everybody who's watching, is this going to lead to a bounce in the polls for the Tories? Because they slashed national insurance by 2p in the autumn. And I don't know if any of you noticed it, but I certainly didn't see anybody skipping down my road going, hooray, now I can pay the energy bills. The Tories have had, since then, they've cut national insurance by 2p, given everyone £8 a week, or lots of people £8 a week. And the Tories have then had their worst poll rating since 1978, all right, which is as long as I've been alive. Now, what is the hope? What is the chance of doing it a second time gonna improve things at all in the polls, which is surely one of the things they're aiming for?
I mean, the fundamental problem, Susie, is that if you take £20 off people and then give them £2 back, they're generally not very grateful. And that's the equivalent to what the Tories are doing. The other problem is as you refer to it, is fiscal drag. So this means, they don't change the threshold at which you start to pay tax. More people get dragged into this, and that's happened on a big scale. And the third problem is the damage caused by the Liz Truss mini disastrous budget, the quasi-Kwarteng fiasco. That's still being kind of felt almost 2 years on. So mortgages are still going up, and that's hitting renters as much as mortgage owners. And so people are, the Tories can say, oh, look, you are better off. But unless people feel better off, there's no electoral gain from it.
No. So I kind of astonishing then almost in a way that they're doing it. But it seems like the only possible benefit to a TP cut in national insurance is it causes Rachel Reeves a £10 billion headache.
Yeah.
And that's
it was a very interesting look at what's happening in America the other day, where Biden's also struggling. And the American pollster, Stan Greenberg, he said his main finding at the moment is, although the economy is doing really well in America and there are more people in work than ever, and inflation has come down, he said the main problem Biden's facing is that the resentment voters felt from the inflationary shock, inflation going really, really high, which is exactly what happened here, lingers a long, long, long time. So in a sense, the Tories have got it worse. So because they made this mistake. This was caused by Truss. It was caused by 14 years of economic mismanagement. Yeah. And the resentment, even though inflation is coming down, that's not going to kind of fizzle out slowly. That's going to hang around like a very dark, nasty cloud over the Tories, regardless of what they do today.
Yeah, maybe potentially go on to the next government as well, I suppose, to some extent. It used to be that it's kind of odd, because it used to be that if the economy was doing well, you could guarantee the government of the day was going to get back in. And if the economy was doing badly, they can guarantee they were going to get dumped. And I think I heard that, particularly in the States, that sort of switched around with Obama. It switched around some time ago. And now the economy is not the only thing people judge their leaders on in the way that it used to be. And so you've had several elections where the economy's done well, but the incumbent has gone, or the economy's done quite badly, like it did under Trump. And it's, they somehow managed to come back again. Because there's other stuff that people start worrying about now, and it's public services, it's pandemic, it's morality in some cases as well, with some of our leaders recently. And it's made the mix just very different as to how you might want to get re-elected. Do you think the Tories have sussed that? Is that partly why they're going for these tax cuts, that they think ideologically it's still 1984 and this will work? It's worked before, lads. And they don't get what's changed?
I mean, I was going to say, to be fair to Jeremy Hunt, I'm not being fair to Jeremy Hunt.
Go on, you can do it.
It's a message I make. But the real problem they've got is that, as I said, the public want things to work again, but he's got a political party which is completely fixated on the idea that tax cuts are the kind of the elixir which voters want to drink, and both can't both be right. And you've got these kind of, the ideologues in the Tory party who still kneel at the shrine of Margaret Thatcher, and they won't kind of accept anything else but tax cuts, regardless of whether it's the right time to do them or whether they're electorally successful or whether they're effective.
Yeah, so we're just sort of stuck where we are, it would seem, at least until there is some kind of a poll about this. Now, if you want to watch the budget, it will be on these channels later on today. There's Prime Minister's Questions at 12, and then at 12:30, Jeremy Hunt stands up on his hind legs and tells us all the stuff that we've been, as Jason has said, we've already heard about. And of course, what he says in the House of Commons really is all going to get reported over the next 24 hours. But it's sort of what happens over the next week, because there's a huge bundle of stuff like this that comes out next to it. And the journalists and the accountants have to sit there with a calculator and go through it and find the small print. And it's those stories which will tell you what the budget's really going to do. And you're going to have to wait for that probably for some of the Sunday papers. But there will be stuff on these channels later on. So if you're fascinated enough to listen to Jeremy Hunt, and maybe he'll drop some bedroom secrets in there as well, if you're really unlucky, then come back here at 12:30 and you'll see some of that. But we have Rachel just wants to say it won't move the polls 1 point. I think people have stopped listening to them. It's just noise now. We're all just waiting for the election. A quick reminder that if they're going to hit May the 2nd, which is when they have local elections, it would be the sensible time to have a general election. They've got to call it on March the 26th. Rachel also adds, the culture wars are so tiring. It really isn't who most of the British people are. Tax cuts are not going to fix it. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Jason, for explaining some of that. Now, speaking of bounces, we have managed to find something that will perk you up. There is some good news in the world, and here it is. Now, if this picture doesn't perk you up, then nothing will. A few weeks ago, the Mirror highlighted the story of Florence Ivy Langton. There she is, a 4-month-old baby who had developed liver problems soon after she was born in October. She's at Leeds Hospital at the moment. Now, after our story, a live donor came forward and proved to be a match. Ivy has now had a part of that very kind person's liver stitched into her, and she's recovering well. She's had her life saved. Basically, it is so worth reading that piece and to hear what her parents have to say about how when they got the phone call and took her down to surgery and everything else. Jason, is this proof really that the only way to get a real bounce is to do something absolutely selfless for somebody else? And
they want to remain anonymous, which is very frustrating from us, but incredibly people. But what an amazing thing to do. I mean, it's just extraordinary. and kind of it shows that the human kindness is there and often underreported, and we should make the most of this because it's a reminder of the goodness in people.
Yeah,
and in this case, the goodness of this liver. I mean, I wouldn't donate mine.
I don't think anybody will want yours or mine for that matter. But this is one of the issues. A few years ago, the Mirror did manage to campaign and change the law on organ donation to change the presumption of consent, so that you have to opt out of organ donation if you don't want to do it. But it doesn't really apply quite the same way for livers. And when it comes to small children like Florence, you have to have kind of part of a grown-up's liver, and they have to hit certain criteria. They have to be quite slim. They have to be between a certain age. They have to not be smoking and drinking, not recently have had children, all that kind of stuff. And so to find someone who can meet all those criteria and who has had the selflessness to come forward is absolutely astonishing, and it really has saved Florence's life, and all in return for nothing. The person wants to stay anonymous. They don't want publicity. They don't want praise. They don't want thanks. They just want Florence to live. Which, oh, excuse me, I've just managed to get myself a bit wound up. I think that's absolutely marvellous. And well done. If you're out there, thank you very much on behalf of Florence's family. And I hope you've read the piece. And if anyone wants to get themselves on an organ donation registry, now is the day to do it. But read that piece about Florence. It's absolutely lovely. Right. Thank you, Jason, for all of that. I have left with a bit of a bounce in my step. I do feel a bit better about the world.
I'm going to get through the budget now. It's going to be okay.
I'm going to stop thinking about Rishi's bedroom secrets, and I'm going to try and ignore as much of the budget as possible until it comes and hits me over the head with a big tax bill. And I'm just going to concentrate on Florence. Thank you, Jason, for taking us through all that. Come back here at 12 o'clock, everybody, if you want to see Prime Minister's questions. Until then, we will see you again on Monday for another edition of the News Agenda. Until then, stay safe. Tatty bye.